Representative Ro Khanna went on a trip to the West Bank that turned very controversial when he was detained by Israeli settlers and the IDF, and then weirdly attacked by American media and other politicians here when he came back home. So we're going to talk all about that with Representative Khanna, who joins us now. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Cenk. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So, Ro, where exactly did you go in the West Bank, and why did you go there?
I went to see Palestine from Palestinian eyes. I had been to Israel 3 times. I wanted to take one trip to the West Bank, to the occupied territories, to see what apartheid there looks like. And I was horrified. We were in Hebron. We were in El-Khair. We saw the razed village of Zunata. And we really went to the towns and villages across the West Bank.
And so there's controversy around whether you got permission to do it or not. So let's dive into that. Number one, I'm not sure that as an American or an American representative, you need permission to go into the West Bank, but that's a literal question as to whether you do from Israel, and what kind of permission you got and what they're saying about it today.
First of all, you need a expedited visa. So we contacted the Israeli embassy and we got a visa within about 10 minutes. The irony is that the Israeli government actually escorted us out of the airport. So they, in terms of the security. In fact, one person at the airport was yelling at me saying, I've done so much damage to the state of Israel because I voted against the aid. Why are they having the security help a member of Congress through the airport, and why are they allowing me in? So obviously the Israeli government knew about it, and we informed the American embassy. And now once you have an American passport with the proper visa, you can just go through the checkpoint into the West Bank. That's the case for everyone, and that's what we did.
So you told the American embassy, and the American embassy eventually did rescue you from that situation with the IDF, which we're going to get to in a second. And you've been very complimentary of them for helping you to do that. But the ambassador, who's of course the head of the embassy, Mike Huckabee, says that you didn't get permission, you didn't tell them, and that it's all your fault. So is he lying?
Well, he's just wrong about the fact that we gave them, not only did we give them a heads up and the Israeli embassy a heads up, but we gave our State Department a heads up through consular services. I mean, think about the facts. How would I just randomly have the cell phone number of the deputy chief of mission? How would I have the ability to just get him on the phone if we hadn't had given the State Department and the American embassy a heads up? How would we have a visa? You know what Huckabee is really concerned about, what the Israeli government is really concerned about, is this precedent that a member of Congress would dare to go to see the West Bank from the lens of Palestinians and not from the lens of the Israeli government or the American government in a curated itinerary. And that's really at the crux of what's bothering them.
Yeah, so that's exactly where I'm going next. But first, to finish off with Ambassador Huckabee. So okay, you guys have different versions of the events. Yours sounds a lot more credible, given that you had their information, you called them, they responded. But how discouraged are you that the American ambassador seems to be siding with a foreign country and not with an American representative?
It's very sad, and I had thought that the American ambassador would just say it's terrible that there was this detainment, and we expect an investigation. We expect accountability. I really thought that, and I would have thought that Huckabee would just call me up and say, "Is everyone in your delegation safe?" But that's not the case, and the reality is that Huckabee's ideology and ideological attachment to the Greater Israel Project, I mean, he refers to the occupied West Bank as Judea Samaria, is more important than him standing up for this American delegation and what happened to us. And he believes the accounts more of the Israeli government and the Israeli settlers than he believes our accounts or the accounts of the New York Times or Reuters or all the journalists who wrote about it.
Yeah, so that's not surprising to people following the news. Ambassador Huckabee doesn't appear to be our ambassador. He seems to be a complete representative of the Israelis. That's actually startlingly obvious to anyone who's looking at it objectively. He doesn't defend us at all. He only defends the Israelis. So now let's move to Mike Huckabee's actual government. That's the Israeli government. So yeah, let's talk about why they are so upset about the trip. What don't they want Americans seeing in the West Bank?
We don't want them seeing that Palestinian Christians are not able to put up Passion of Christ play because all the settlers have taken the land, that the Palestinians and Christians and Muslims don't have enough water to wash their clothes or flush their toilet, that in Hebron, settlers are throwing rotten tomatoes, rotten vegetables, metal parts, urine and acid at the shop owners below who are Palestinian and who are living in an apartheid condition, that at checkpoints, even if you're an American citizen, if you're Palestinian, you could be beaten, and accounts of people being beaten, that settler violence can strike at any moment, vandalizing homes, vandalizing people, and that the IDF takes their side even against American citizens. I mean, it's awful. You have to spend one day there and just be sick to your stomach.
Is it worse than you expected?
Yes, much worse.
Yeah.
The violence is much worse. Sense I expected people would have 2 lanes to drive on, that there'd be some roads you couldn't drive on, that people would be second-class citizens. I didn't expect that people fear for their lives every time they go out, and that the IDF is basically totally aligned with the extremist settlers. I didn't expect that that people would have urine and acid thrown on them. I didn't expect that settlements have taken 80% of the land of a place like Beit Jala, which is what used to be majority Christian, or Bethlehem is surrounded by 24 illegal settlements, the place of Christ's birth. I mean, it was jarring, and I certainly didn't expect the audacity of the IDF and extremist settlers to detain an American delegation.
Yeah, so there's something curious about that reaction to that event. So I want you to tell us what happened. How did the settlers pull you over? How did the IDF react, for those who haven't heard it? But also the reaction here at home seems to be, so what? That's like normal. Of course, if you're an American, you should get pulled over at gunpoint by settlers. And the idea that that would be a risk to your safety is absurd. I mean, they all came to give you flowers and rainbows, I assume, or I guess they're saying. And then, of course, the IDF would agree with the crazed settlers and not the American representative. Are any of those things what you expected, or what they say otherwise? It doesn't seem like it. They tell us that they're lovely people and that you should have no problems. Then when you run into massive problems, they go, I mean, that couldn't possibly be the case. So tell us what happened there, and then especially vis-a-vis the reaction you got at home.
Well, look, we were at Zunat village. It had been razed to the ground by Yanan Levy, one of the extremist settlers. And as we were there, we were suddenly told, go in your van, go in your van. Extremist settlers, one brandishing an M4 American gun, started walking outside our van, kicking our tires, videotaping us, laughing at us. They had blocked their vehicle in front of our van. And people said, well, oh, that's not a detainment. You should have just been able to go. Well, there was only one road out, and they blocked that road. How were we supposed to go? I guess we could have tried to swerve around them and had them shoot at us. But obviously that didn't happen. And what the reaction is of course that could happen to you in the West Bank. Basically, that it's normalized, which is actually not an unfair characterization. That if you go to the West Bank, you can have extremist settlers with M4 guns basically detain you, and it shows the conditions there that Palestinians are having to deal with every time. But then when we called the IDF, they further detained us and didn't let us go. And settlers kept calling other settlers to come detain us as well. And it was only because we knew the number 2 person at the American embassy who called the Israeli government that the police came and dispersed the situation 75 to 90 minutes in. I haven't exaggerated. They never pointed a gun at us, but blockading us and brandishing M4s is a pretty scary thing. And we were concerned that if anything escalated, especially given the laughing at us and mocking us and videotaping us, it could have been a threat to our lives. And I'm convinced if we were Palestinian, it would have been resulting in physical violence.
Well, didn't settlers in around exactly that area beat a Palestinian American to death?
I'm not sure if they did in terms of the reports. I will tell you that they destroyed this entire school and they destroyed the entire village of Zanuda. And so they are violent settlers. And Yanan Levy, who is the leader of that outpost, killed in cold blood Ottawa, which is on videotape, and he's still a free person.
Yeah. So we talked to the father of the young American who was slain there. And CNN actually was doing a tour after you in that similar area with that same American father. And they also got pulled over, and the settlers tried to stab their tires so that they couldn't leave. And the same kind of thuggery that happened from the same people, not the same exact people, but the settlers in that area who have murdered Americans and totally gotten away with it. So look, when you look at that entire context, Representative Khanna, when I see people on TV every day talking about how Israel's our greatest ally, it seems like a sick joke. If they were our greatest ally, wouldn't they have come to your defense immediately instead of openly mocking you and detaining you along with these radical religious fundamentalist settlers?
No, they disrespected me. They disrespected even other Americans on the van. They disrespected our media. A New York Times photographer was there. And obviously they did not act like an ally. Forget that. They didn't act like almost any other country would act, which is apologize to the American people. They acted with an arrogance and an impunity that makes them think they don't have to answer to the fate of Americans.
Were you surprised when you got back at the level of pushback that a lot of people in media and in politics, instead of being outraged and having your back, started attacking you politically?
I was, because the facts were totally disputed. I mean, the New York Times literally photographer was there and they wrote about the whole incident, and the Reuters wrote about the whole incident. And it's not like I was there myself, where you may think, okay, is he exaggerating? But there are 10 people on our van and we had video footage and we released all of it. And yet they're still questioning the facts. Initially, I was very surprised. And then I realized what was at stake. They don't want other people to take the trip I did. And as Ryan Grimm has reported, that some members of Congress looked at what happened to me as a reason to vote against the aid to Israel, the Massey Amendment. They knew the Massey Amendment was coming up, and they were very concerned that what happened to me would affect that vote. And so their effort to discredit me was not personal. It's just they don't want people voting against their aid, and they don't want people taking the trips I did.
Yeah. So the upside of it is exactly as you mentioned. Dropsite News reporting today that several, usually very strongly pro-Israel legislators, switched their vote to funding against Israel, not funding Israel, because of what happened to you, including up to Nancy Pelosi, which is a little bit startling. So was it gratifying to see at least some Americans? I mean, this should be all Americans, and some Democrats, it should be all Democrats, but at least some Democrats coming to your defense and saying this is unacceptable and we're not going to fund a country that does this to American representatives?
I appreciated a lot of House colleagues saying that. There are a few outliers like Josh Gottheimer who didn't, but the vast majority of House Democrats and even some House Republicans came over and said that. And look, this is the first time since 1978 when Leo Ryan was shot to death, also from California, that a United States congressperson has either been detained with guns or shot at overseas. So it's not an insignificant thing. And Nancy Pelosi is well aware of the Leo Ryan incident. Leo Ryan was a member of Congress from the Bay Area. So what's shocking is that this is not a bigger incident. I mean, imagine if this had happened in China or in France or in an African country, that an American member of Congress goes and is there with a group of Americans and suddenly they're detained, and then the military takes the side of the extremists. It would be international news. And so I think anyone who looks at it says that is just wrong.
Okay, so now that is what anyone who looks at it in a rational and objective way says. But nevertheless, 314 members of Congress voted to keep Israel's funding going. They keep these nonsense talking points about how they're our special ally and they have a right to exist, as if anyone questioned their existence. They have nukes, they have Iron Dome. I could ask you if it's time for Israel to be a grown-up country and actually just pay for the things on their own, and if they like to go to war, that they should. That's a very heavy responsibility. They should decide on their own and not drag us into it. But that's kind of obvious, and it's obvious from your voting record that you largely agree with that. So what I'm actually asking is, since that's so obvious at this point, not just the Democratic voters, but to Republican voters, an overwhelming majority of Americans, why is the overwhelming majority of Congress still supporting Israel? Isn't it obviously because of the donor money that they're getting?
Yes, that's the biggest factor. The reality is they see what happened to my colleague Thomas Massie, $30 million come in against him. They see what happened to Abdul Saeed. And so Republicans, not a single Republican voted for the Massey Amendment. I said, how is that possible when the vast majority of Republicans under 50 are against Israel based on the polling, have turned on him? And it's very simple. They say, okay, it's one issue. We know we're taking a PR hit, but we don't want $10 million coming in against us. And on the Democratic side, a similar sense of hesitation. And people say, well, yes, this is an uncomfortable vote. We know it's on the unpopular side. But our concern is super PAC money coming in and taking us out.
Well, isn't this a foreign country interfering with our elections?
Oh, look, a lot of them are Americans, and they're American citizens who have a view of what our foreign policy should be. But it is the prime example of why we need money out of politics, why we need to overturn Citizens United. You and I have talked about how Congress is never going to do that. So we need a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United so we can get private money out of politics, regulate it, and go to the states to have at least 2/3 of the states recommend an amendment. And the reason this has become such a big issue on Gaza and Israel is it's exhibit one of a corruption of a political process that has led to a foreign policy that is not just against American interests, but has led to the deaths of nearly 20,000 children in Gaza and is supporting apartheid in the West Bank.
Yeah, they're US citizens, some of them are dual Israeli citizens, but they are definitively saying that the members of Congress should be loyal to Israel and not to America. That is definitive, that is what the money is for. Millions of dollars to be loyal to Israel. I think it's disgusting. I'm really glad that you're a leading proponent against that. Last question for you, and this is tough because of the danger that you were in and how awful it is, but how much you also learned from it. Should more members of Congress try to do a trip to the West Bank, not a Israeli-led propaganda trip, but the kind that you did?
Absolutely. You can't understand it until you see it. I mean, it's ironic that people are saying this is a publicity stunt. It's about as stupid as people who said that Donald Trump staged his own assassination. Usually people don't ask to be held up, his own assassination attempt. Usually people don't ask to be held up by people brandishing guns. But I do believe that people in our country, members of Congress, need to go there and see it. And yes, it is some risk. I'm not going to lie. It is uncomfortable. You can take security. Maybe the Israeli government will be a little more careful because of what happened to me. But I'm you know this. I'm an action-oriented person. I don't just talk. I put my body on the line, not the way so many people do, protecting Palestinian villages, but I went into the actual areas for 3 days. I have actually delivered the release of the Epstein files. I had a primary run against me because I said we should tax billionaires, and that led to the California ballot initiative getting on the ballot. I have said we should subpoena Elon Musk, and he threatened to sue me. It's a time for the Democrats to have action, to be courageous, to take a moral stand, and that's really, I think, what people are asking for.
All right, Representative Ro Khanna, thank you for leading by example. There was no question there was courage involved, and there's no question there was leadership involved. So thank you for doing that, and I agree with you. I hope more members of Congress do exactly what you did and get a real eyewitness account of what the terror that the Palestinians live under in the West Bank, so we could see how awful this apartheid state we're funding is. All right, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.